Kristen Atchison here, and we are talking about forgetting. Hopefully you will not forget the information you learned here. So forgetting, again, we have this two-track mind, and so we also, forgetting is going to play a role in that too, or that two-track mind is going to play a role in our forgetting. So this can either be more on that explicit level, or it can kind of be on that implicit level. It can be depending on how the information went into the system. So it can be an encoding failure, it can be a storage decay, and it can be a retrieval failure. And we'll talk about those differences in a minute. When do we forget? Really, it can happen at any point in this information processing model. So remember, this is how we look at memory as this kind of series of boxes, this kind of computer system where the information goes out, it's stored, and the information comes out again. And so it can happen. It can happen when we're encoding it. It can happen in storage. It can happen in retrieval. When we process information, we filter it. So we take out some of the information to begin with. We don't remember everything around us at all times. We alter it. We talked a lot about how we alter it in the memory errors lecture that we had. Or we can lose a lot of it too. It's just, you can't remember everything. You can't store everything. So one of the ways that we forget is encoding failure. And that's what it sounds like. We can't remember what we haven't encoded. If you haven't put it in the system, you're not going to be able to get it out of the system. So it's like if you're trying to get a file that you worked on yesterday, but you didn't save the file on your computer. Well, you can't get it out because you didn't save it. That's exactly what encoding failure is. So the failure is happening at encoding. When it's going between working and short-term memory, before it gets to long-term memory, that's where the forgetting is happening. And so this information never gets coded into long-term memory at all. And some memories can't be encoded without effort. Remember, we can only encode explicit information with more effortful processing. Implicit information is going to be more automatic, but some memories can't be stored without effort. So again, this is going to be a piece that can contribute to encoding failure and can contribute to encoding failure differentially between explicit and implicit memories. Encoding failure is caused by a number of different things, one of which can be age-related memory decline. There are age-related memory declines, and this is going to affect encoding as well. We can also see that dual processing, that two-track mind. What you pay attention to is more likely to be remembered than what you don't pay attention to. You can't encode what you weren't paying attention to. So we live in a very, especially now, a very diverse, stimulating environment, and you can't pay attention to everything. And so you're going to be more likely to remember what you do put your attention to, your selective attention to, what you choose to consciously attend to, than what you don't. And again, that's that role of that two-track mind in encoding. Another way that we forget is storage decay. So when we're in that middle box, we're in that storage, the files break down. They don't stay as good. If you have a file that's on a, like an old disk, an old like floppy-ish disk, or your parents do, those files may not be able to be read in our current systems. And so again, this is that kind of that idea of storage decay from this information processing model, that memories gradually decay if they're not used. So kind of think of it as decomposition, right? So if you're not using something, if you're not maintaining something, it starts to fall apart, okay? If you're not using something, it starts to fall apart. And that's how memories are. At first, this happens really, really rapidly, but then after a certain time, it starts to level off, okay? So if you're not using something frequently, it's going to rapidly come out of your memory. But after a certain period of time, this kind of forgetting starts to level off. Again, this is this rapid loss, and then this levels off. is the kind of the idea of memory trace. Here's a graph that really shows kind of this storage decay. So if you took a foreign language in high school, or maybe not in college because you're in college now, or middle school, and when you first stopped taking Spanish, you really lost a lot of that vocabulary, a lot of that grammar really, really quickly in the first 1 to 5 years afterwards. After that, it kind of levels off. So the last time I took Spanish was in high school. And so I lost a lot in college, and it kind of leveled off after that. And I'm kind of at the same basic level that I was when I was in college, because I've had that leveling off process. Now I have at least the added bonuses that my daughter takes Spanish, and so I'm starting to try and reuse some of that information, trying to relearn some of that information. But this is an example of a research study that was done. And it's not Spanish specific, obviously, and this could be about any kind of information. The last kind of forgetting we're going to talk about is retrieval failure. So you encode it, it gets into long-term memory, it stays in long-term memory. It doesn't decay in long-term memory. But when you try and get it out, something goes wrong. And this can be a number of different reasons for this, and we'll talk about a couple of them. And we'll talk about interference, and we'll talk about what's that thing? That thing where you know it and it's in your head and you can describe all around it, but you can't remember what that thing is called. That thing is called tip of the tongue phenomenon, where it's right there on the tip of your tongue, but you can't remember what it is. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I was teaching an experimental methods course, and I was meeting with a small group of students to go over their research that they had designed and how they were doing it, and I'm sitting with them and my TA, and we're talking about their methods and what's going good with them and what's not. And there were two big things that we've already talked about in this class, reliability and validity, and I could not remember validity for anything. So again, I teach this all the time, and I'm sitting there, and this was in fact pregnancy related, because that is a memory thing. Pregnancy can affect memory. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's not reliability, it's the other one. And they're like, what? I was experiencing that tip of the tongue phenomenon. I had a retrieval failure. I knew the information, but I was having problems getting it out of long-term memory. I was having pregnancy-induced problems of getting them out of long-term memory. Another thing we can have in terms of retrieval failure is interference. There's two different ways we talk about interference. And the idea of interference is just what it sounds like. Something is interfering with you getting that information out. Okay, so that's what the interference is. There's two different types of that. We can have proactive interference, and that is when the information you learned before messes up the recall of the new information. Okay, so my parents have lived in the same house my entire life. They've had the exact same phone number my entire life. There's even a really cute song that they taught me to learn my phone number, and I'll even sing it to you now because you know what? They're about to move, and you don't know the area code. So 933-7441, 933-7441, 933-7441. That's my phone number. So that's how I learned my phone number when I was a kid. So that was going to be one of those encoding techniques. Making it rhyme helped me get it into memory. Even my friends in high school, we joked they learned this song and they still remember my parents' phone number. But my parents are moving and they're going to get a new phone number. And I'm going to have, I can guarantee you, proactive interference. There'll be times when I need to call them that I will dial the old number, because that's what I'm used to doing. That old information is affecting my ability to remember the new information, okay? I still do this sometimes, writing my name. I'll write, and I've been married for about almost 15 years at this point. Sometimes I'll be writing my name, especially if I ever have to bubble in my name, and I bubble in my maiden name instead of my married name. That's proactive interference. The prior learning of information is affecting the recall of new information. I know my last name is Atchison, but that I also knew really well that my last name was Kuhlman. And so that there's interference between those. Retroactive interference is the opposite. So it's the disruptive effect of new learning on the recall of old information, okay? So think about it, I know it's hard to get those two straight. So retro, the old information is where we're having a problem, okay? We're having a problem remembering the old information. It's retro. The retro information is the one that's getting messed up. So again, this new information is messing up what you knew before. So again, here's two little images of that. So in retroactive interference, you learn something new, and that's giving you a hard time at remembering the thing you knew before, okay? So that new information is giving you a problem remembering your old information. So we moved a couple of times since we've had our daughter, and I cannot remember my zip code from when I lived in California at all. Like, at all. I can tell you it started with a 9, and that's about all I've got because my new learning of my zip code here has interfered with that. Whereas, again, proactive is where the old information is interfering with the new information. So that's, again, my maiden name. Knowing how to bubble in a Scantron with my maiden name affects my ability to bubble in a Scantron with my current name. So again, this is the difference between retroactive and proactive interference. And again, both of these are a kind of retrieval failure. So that ends our conversation about forgetting. Again, we talked about encoding. We talked about problems with encoding. It didn't happen. So if we have an encoding failure, you're not going to be able to remember it. We talked about storage decay, where something happened in the storage process of it. And we talked about retrieval failure. Now, if you remember that information processing model that I showed you at the very beginning when we started talking about memory, we talked about the 3 different pieces, right? Encoding, storage, and recall, or pulling that information out, retrieval. And again, we can have something go wrong at each step of the way. We can have something go wrong in encoding. We can have something go wrong in storage. And we can have something go wrong in retrieval. Thanks.